Earlier this month, after years of negotiations, Swiss President Guy Parmelin and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen signed a comprehensive package of agreements known as the Bilaterals III. Covering a wide range of areas, including Switzerland's access to the EU internal market, trade in agricultural goods, food safety, health and electricity regulations, Switzerland's accession to various EU programmes including Horizon Europe and Erasmus+, Switzerland's permanent contribution to the EU's Cohesion Fund, and a joint declaration to discuss possible expansions of bilateral relations in the future, the package builds on the two parties' pre-existing bilateral treaties and will now go through Parliament before being put to a referendum in 2028. So in this video, we'll take a look at the new package of agreements and explain why Switzerland is deepening relations with the EU. President Erdogan was ranked 19th in our list of the world's most influential people. So in the latest issue of our magazine Too Long, we discuss how his various foreign policy gambles apparently paid off, and how he's been able to consolidate power inside Turkey over the past year or so. That's just one of 72 pages in the magazine, because as always, there's more to Too Long than you'd expect. Purchase your copy by clicking the link in the description. First, let's start with some background on Swiss-EU relations. Since the 1970s, when Switzerland signed a free trade agreement with the European Economic Community, the EU's predecessor, Swiss-EU relations have been defined by two sets of bilateral agreements. The Bilaterals I, mostly focused on free movement and economic integration, and the Bilaterals II, expanding cooperation in security, political and specialised economic areas. Together, these amounted to 10 separate treaties, bringing Switzerland in line with the rest of the European Economic Area, or EEA, with most EU law, including on the free movement of people, goods, services and capital, also applying to Switzerland. For context, in May 1992, Switzerland actually applied for EU membership, but in December 1992, the Swiss population narrowly voted no in a referendum to join the European Economic Area, or EEA, with 50.3% voting against and 49.7% voting for. This subsequently led Switzerland to suspend talks on EU accession, and 2 years later, in 1994, it began talks with the EU on economic integration outside the EEA. The idea was to pursue a special bilateral approach, whereby the two sides would negotiate a series of bilateral agreements in place of EU or EEA membership, basically allowing Switzerland to maintain formal sovereignty, even though in practice it still adopts most of the EU's rules on free movement, technical standards and competition in return for access to the EU's internal market. This special Swiss-EU relationship has been criticised by some officials, who see the Swiss system as overly complex compared to the streamlined framework of the EEA. Anyway, the Bilaterals I agreements were signed in 1999, with the Bilaterals II agreements coming 5 years later in 2004. The EU has since been pushing for an updated package of agreements, and in 2012 said Switzerland would have no further agreements within the single market unless it agreed to a full legal framework, similar to the EEA, that would align Switzerland more closely with EU rules. Negotiations on this wider framework first took place in 2014 and 2018, but the Swiss Federal Council, the government, refused to endorse the package and talks stalled. In 2021, negotiations were restarted, but then collapsed again after the Swiss government unilaterally broke off talks, citing disagreements over freedom of movement and migration. However, in 2024, talks picked up again, with the two sides instead agreeing to an open-ended discourse on multiple areas. By late 2024, negotiations on the new Bilaterals III package were completed. In June 2025, the Swiss Federal Council approved the package, last month the EU Council formally authorised it, and in early March, Swiss President Guy Parmelin and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen signed the deal in Brussels. So, what's actually in the Bilaterals III package, and why is Switzerland now deepening relations with the EU? Well, it's a very comprehensive set of agreements, covering a multitude of areas. We can basically split them into two categories: updated agreements and new agreements. The updated agreements basically cover the fields related to Switzerland's access to the EU internal market, namely land transport, air transport, the free movement of people, trade in agricultural products, and the Switzerland-EU Mutual Recognition Agreement, which facilitates trade by removing technical barriers, including for machinery, electronics, medical equipment, and construction products. These agreements were originally signed in 1999 as the Bilaterals I, but have now been adapted to reflect changes in EU law and to lay down effective mechanisms for the resolution of disputes, including the referral to the Court of Justice of the European Union. Alongside that, the Bilaterals III package also includes several new agreements on food safety, health and electricity, as well as a legally binding agreement for Switzerland to make a regular financial contribution to the reduction of economic and social disparities in the EU. For context, since 2007, Switzerland has supported the EU's efforts to reduce interregional inequality by funding selected EU member states directly, deciding which projects and programmes to support, without the money passing through the EU budget. However, while this was a voluntary bilateral agreement, the formal new Agreement on Cohesion makes it legally binding for Switzerland to provide a regular financial contribution to the EU's cohesion programmes within the framework of the EU budget, officially the Multi-Annual Financial Framework or MFF, with a joint committee to be set up to oversee implementation and handle disputes, something that didn't exist previously. Finally, the package also includes new agreements for Switzerland to join various EU programmes, including the Erasmus Plus exchange network, the Horizon Europe Research Programme, EU for Health, a body working towards a European Health Union, and the EU Agency for the Space Programme. So, why is Switzerland now deepening its relationship with the EU? Well, the first reason is simply that the EU saw the previous Bilaterals I and II packages as out of date, and had been pushing for Switzerland to adopt more of its laws for more than a decade. This is consistent with the EU's treatment of other non-EU countries in Europe with access to the EU internal market, such as Norway, Iceland and Liechtenstein, and so the Bilaterals III package is aimed at resolving the legal uncertainty created by the misalignment between EU law and Switzerland's older agreements. The second reason, though, is that, given ongoing geopolitical instability, having a closer economic relationship with the EU is in Switzerland's interest. The EU is by far Switzerland's largest trading partner, and damage to Swiss-EU relations has previously had drastic impacts on some sectors. For instance, after talks on the Bilaterals III package collapsed in 2021 and Switzerland lost access to the Horizon Europe programme, Swiss universities, researchers and startups struggled with a lack of funding and an alleged brain drain of project leads and innovators to other countries. Stabilising market access and ensuring frictionless trade with the EU through an updated legal framework should, therefore, help reduce long-term economic uncertainty. Similarly, Switzerland faced the highest tariff rate in Europe from US President Donald Trump last year, with US tariffs on Swiss exports rising to 39% between August and November, well above the EU's rate of 15%, and so deepening relations with the EU allows Switzerland to de-risk from America and offset volatility in global trade. As we mentioned earlier, the latest edition of our magazine Too Long is out now, which means that if you order a physical edition, it'll be shipped to you immediately, and if you buy a digital edition, it'll land in your inbox straight away. No pre-ordering, no waiting. Plus, if you subscribe while you're there using code SPRING26, you'll get your first copy for as little as £4.99, as well as 20% off every future issue as long as you stay subscribed. One other thing to know is that if you're more of a listener than a reader, which would be fair enough, we are a YouTube channel after all, then this time round we've recorded every article in Too Long, with each of our writers doing their best audiobook impression while narrating their own articles.
The New Age of Empires. Written and read by Georgina Finley.
If you want that, then you can sign up to our new Too Long and TLDR Party bundle. That gets you a copy of the magazine, but also access to TLDR Party, our new subscription. Party members not only get access to the audio versions of every article, they also get access to our documentaries, like our new series Leaders and Losers and our upcoming documentary we're recording in Greenland right now. They get access to our behind-the-scenes podcast, The Bullpen, our bonus podcast, The Last Move, their name printed in every issue of our magazine, and more. Find out more about TLDR Party by clicking the link in the description, where you'll also find a link to subscribe to Too Long and our documentaries.